Hi everybody, Rob here from Prior Studios, and welcome to this tutorial on the kind of 2.5D or parallax effect in Photoshop. So you might think that jumping into After Effects is the best way to kind of cut up a photo and add some depth to it. We could do it in Nuke or Fusion, any of those kind of apps, but actually doing it in Photoshop is pretty efficient, it's pretty quick and pretty easy. So I'll just drag up an example to show you. And you can see this is the example from my YouTube channel. Let's just get rid of that. And what you're looking at here is just a little bit of added depth. And you can see that I'm moving through the frame, and there's a little bit of kind of scaling going on as well. So let's close that down and we'll look at Photoshop and see how we can do that. And it's really quite simple. So I've got here just a flat photo. You can see there are no layers involved, although I'm going to just open this up so it's a workable layer just by clicking on the padlock. I'm also going to go to my image and image size, and I'm going to resize this so it fits within a full HD window. So let's just go 1920 by 1275. Oh, let's change this to, no, that's fine. That's fine, and we'll crop it if we need to. So here we go. We have our photo now resized, and the first thing we want to do is to eliminate me from the background layer and bring me onto a new layer. Of course, you can do this with multiple layers. If there are things that you want to have in the midground or further into the background, that's fine. I'm just going to use this one cutout. So I'm going to, you can do this in a number of ways. You choose whichever masking tools you want to use. I'm going to go straight into actually painting a mask. So I'm going to take my brush tool, and I've clicked on the mask icon there. I'm just going to increase the size of this brush and just start painting. I'm going to make sure that this is 100% opaque. I don't want any kind of gradients or anything missing. And also just going to click on my brush here and make sure it's 100% hard. Size of 90, that's fine. If I go to my brush palette, I'm going to reduce the spacing, or just turn it off in fact, so that we have a smooth edge here on my brush. Close this down, and I'm not going to make you sit through watching me build my mask. You could use the lasso, depending on your source photo, you could use the magic wand, that might work well for you. So get your image masked and join me back in just a second. So here you can see I'm all masked out, and if I click on the mask icon here, we should see I have a nice selection. Now at the moment I've masked me and not the background, and I want to invert that. So you can either come up here to select and just choose inverse, or you can see shortcut is Shift Control I, which I'm going to use just because I'm a big fan of the keyboard shortcut. Now I'm going to hit Control J, and that will bring my selection into a new layer, which if I hide the background layer, you can see here I am. Now, just before I do that, I just want to undo what I've done. I'm going to take that selection, I'm going to make sure it's the inverted copy which has got me in it. I'm going to go back to selection, I'm just going to go to modify, and I'm going to go to feather and choose 2 pixels, and then I'm going to go to Apple J, and that will give me a slight fringe around the edge, which is very subtle, as you can see, but will help just stop any odd transition, because what you don't want to happen is to have any weird fringing. So that feathering just helps a little bit. So I'm going to turn off this top layer, but first of all I'm just going to rename it to Rob, because that's the layer with me on it. I'm just going to hide it, and in this layer I'm just going to go to select, and let's just make sure I've got my selection for my up. Okay, so I'm going to just go to select, here we go, make sure that selection's live and it's over me, not the background. And what we want to do is we want to fill this, so I'm just going to hit the V key to go into my selection tool, which should let me, okay, of course. Okay, so what you need to go is edit, fill, and I want to use this content aware fill. So in this drop down you have a few options. You have black, white, grey, pattern, something from your history, or a selection of colours, but we want the content aware. and we want this to be normal mode, 100% opacity, and let's hit OK. And what this is going to do is it's going to look at the surrounding pixels and try and fill the shape of me with things that would look like they're kind of fitting to the background. So hopefully the beach will come out quite nicely. And that's not too bad. So I'm going to drop the selection and maybe just tidy up a couple of areas. So I'm going to go to my healing brush and just make sure that's activated there. I'm going to increase the size of the brush and just get rid of this weird little artifact here. So paint over that. That's fine. Now I don't want two of these boat shapes, so I'm just going to get rid of one and some of this wateriness. Now you can see what I'm not doing here is being particularly accurate or even that choosy. All I want to do is just pick some of this and get rid of it. I am literally just making sure that there are no weird things going on. Now this strange line here is going to be harder to deal with. We don't have to worry too much about it. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to just take a sample. I'm just going to rubber stamp mode. And let's just reduce the size of this. Choose a target area here, and I'm going to reduce the opacity down to about half. I'm just going to try and get rid of some of this. In fact, let's use a messier brush, might work quite well for this situation. Opacity right down, size right up. And all I'm doing is a really, really dirty, quick fix over the top of this. Just adding a little bit of noise, because we're not actually going to see much of this. This isn't going to be anything that we're paying any attention to. And we can even blur it out a little bit. Just bring some of this across. Like so. I'm going to go to my blur tool and just soften up some of that there. And now if I bring me back, there we go, looks good. So if I take this layer with me on it, and I just shuffle it across, the areas that the content aware fill has kind of worked on for us look pretty good, because we're not really paying attention to them, we're paying attention to the figure in the foreground. And that's what we want. So let's just undo that, put it back there. And now what we want to do is we want to go to Window, Timeline. And let's just give ourselves a bit more space here. We're going to have two tracks. It's going to hit Control 0 to, or Control 0 rather than Control O. And we want to add these two tracks to our timeline. So let's take these two and let's just drag them into here. Sometimes this seems to work, others it doesn't. So what I'm going to do is actually just use the Create Video Timeline with these two selected, and it should pop them in. That's fine. Now we have 5 seconds worth of timeline here, which is fine. That's exactly what we want. And at the moment, nothing is happening. Now, one thing to bear in mind is if I take this layer and I open up the tracks that we have available, let's just give ourselves a bit more room again so you can see what has opened up. We have position, opacity, and style. But in the example, you can see that the background actually scaled slightly to give that kind of Jaws-like zoom effect. And we can't do that with any of these. So what we need to do is we need to make this into a smart layer. So let's just right click on layer 0 and convert to smart object. And now if we open this up, we have a transform. And the transform lets us scale it up. So what we're going to do, we'll start off by doing this background layer, and at frame 0, I'm just going to click on the stopwatch, and that will give us a transform keyframe. And you can see the gold diamond here, or the yellow diamond, is a keyframe. We want to go right to the end, which is going to be here. We don't need to see anymore. And we need to now transform this layer. So let's just grab our transform tool, and I'm holding Alt Shift and I'm just scaling that up a little bit. Just going to use the spacebar to bring this back in and let me see what's going on. I'm going to add another keyframe just by hitting the diamond there, or hit return, and should make one for you automatically. Okay, so now we have a background which is scaling over time. So let's now deal with the foreground. So I'm going to open up just by hitting the arrow, and I'm going to keyframe the position. So if we take that position there, and then we'll go to the end, which will be there, and with the V key we'll just drag this across just a little bit, just to the center of the frame. Should be fine. The keyframe has been added, and now you can see we have our animation. Now if I want to scale me as well, which I might well do, in fact let's do that as well. So we'll make me into a smart object like so, and we'll have a transform at the start, and we'll add a transform at the end. Let's just make sure I'm scaled up at a slightly different rate, slightly smaller. So this is a lower rate of transform, which will actually help sell the effect of a lens change. Okay, so that's looking pretty good, and that's all there is to it. That's a really down dirty and quick way of just kind of breathing a bit of life into a photograph. Now when you want to export this, you have lots of options to export, but all you do is go File, Export, and then Render Video. That will open up a dialog once it has a little think about things, and you have your Adobe Media Encoder options. So I'm not going to go through all the options here. I think this is fine, but give it a name. QuickTime, Full HD, frame rate, I would go for 25 or 24 for me. And that's it. Hit the render button and it's saved to disk. So I hope this has been of some use, and I'll see you all again in another video. Now this particular one came from a question through one of my Patreon supporters, or Patreon supporters. So if you have a question, please do let me know, and I will do my best to cover it in a future video. Thanks very much. Bye bye.